So as we move further into ancient China, we're going to look at different artists and how they respond to the masterful work of Fan Quan. We're now in the Southern Sung Dynasty. Um, this in this period, the capital moved from Kaifeng in the north to Hangzhou in the south. And the southern geography is very different. There's more water, there's more rolling hills. And we see that that shift reflected here in Ma Yuan's On a Mountain Path in Spring. This is an example of a Southern Sung Dynasty landscape. And the Southern Sung painters also differ from their predecessors in that they favored the album leaf format. So if we go back to Fan Quan, this is a massive vertical hanging scroll. This is many feet long. It would be displayed in that vertical format hanging on a wall. Ma Yuan's work would be part of a bound album with different landscapes, kind of in a book format, and this is an individual leaf in that book. This is the quintessential depiction of the life of a gentleman scholar. We see the scholar shown here in the center in a hieratic scale to show his importance. He's, half the size of the tree here, and we see the servant in the far left much, much smaller. It's about, spring, kind of where we're at right now. The leaves on the tree are just beginning to bud. Birds have taken flight, all at the start of spring. We also see the incorporation of text, and this is another key part of Asian landscape. We often see this combination of poetry, painting, and calligraphy. This is a poem by the Emperor Ningzhong in the upper corner, and calligraphy is really considered the highest art form in Chinese society, whereas painting, the actual landscape, is considered the lowest. And the interconnectedness of all three is really important, and that's an idea that we are going to see. We're going to see other examples of this idea of combining both image and text. But let's move to Japan, and we're going to see how some of these Chinese ideals get imported across the sea of Japan. We are looking at post-1933 Japan. This is a shift between two different shogunates, so two different samurai clans. And what's important is that with the arrival of this new Ashikaga clan, they take control and they move the capital from Kamakura over to Kyoto. Kyoto is important because it is the ancient capital of Japan. It has this really important legacy. At the same time, we see the import of, and I'm sorry, this is called the Muromachi period. Not absolutely crucial for you to remember, though. So the key idea that comes from China at this time is Zen Buddhism. And think for a second about how we use the word Zen colloquially today. If we say, oh, that's Zen, we might mean it's calm, chill, peaceful. We might mean meditative. Zen Buddhism is a branch of Buddhism that focuses on learning something through experience. So not just reading the texts, not just reading the Buddhist theologians, but actually experiencing something for oneself. And the key teacher in the Zen Buddhist movement, the first patriarch, is named Bodhidharma. You see his name here. And we see two different depictions of Bodhidharma from China. We see the meditating Daruma on the left, another name for the Bodhidharma, and then the Bodhidharma meditating here on the right as well. And what's so interesting, well, let me tell you the story of Bodhidharma first. He was so committed to his meditation practice that he actually cut off his eyelids so that he could not fall asleep during meditation. That is intense. And because he is seen as the important leader of Zen Buddhism, he comes to be represented abstractly in a single spontaneous brushstroke, which refers to the fact that he was able to meditate so long that it actually made his body look rock-like. Look at the form of the Bodhidharma here on the left and on the right. And I love this. I love this image here on the right because we see a bit of calligraphy and no setting. Everything has been reduced, has been minimized to just a single brushstroke that we can trace here that outlines the Bodhidharma. Very striking. Zen Buddhism also affects garden design in Kyoto, and we see this unique type of rock garden design emerge in Kyoto to aid in the practice of Zen meditation, and all to achieve enlightenment. This type of rock garden is called Karisansui, which means dry mountain and water. So in this type of garden, you're only using rocks, pebbles, and sand, and the pebbles you'll notice here are raked into different designs to suggest the flow of water, but no actual water is used. The gardens connect nature and landscape, and the maintenance of these gardens was an important practice for a Zen Buddhist monk at the time. The visitor to this garden, the monks are now today open to any visitor. You are on a wooden platform looking out over this rock garden. And what's interesting is that you see these kind of carefully positioned clusters of larger rocks. No matter where you are on that platform, you can never see all of the rocks at once. There's this idea that a singular point of view is never going to give you all of the information you need. And I think that's a pretty good life lesson. Okay, let's see how this translates then into Japanese landscape painting, taking these ideas from a Zen Buddhist rock garden and applying them as Seishu Toyo does into the winter landscape. The Japanese Zen community highly valued secular ink monochrome landscapes. This genre, of course, came from China. And here what we see we are back to that hanging scroll format, that large vertical hanging scroll. Seishu Toyo, he actually traveled to China in the late 1460s. He wanted to study advanced Chinese painting styles and his technique. He perfected them in China. He got to see all sorts of different examples, and he brought back that knowledge to Japan. In this snowy landscape, we see one tiny figure here, completely dwarfed by the natural elements. And there's this zigzag pattern here through the composition, where we go from the rocky outcropping here. We follow the path that ends at a monastery in the middle ground. And then here in the center of the composition, we see this huge, jagged rock face ascending up. But the composition itself is really just reduced to a few key lines, inclines, that are very abstracted. There's just suggestions of forms, and it almost appears in places, just like what we saw in Fan Quan, that these forms seem to disappear into the mist, as the rocky outcropping does here, and even as some of the forms do kind of here in the middle ground. There is a kind of, there is a kind of illusion of spatial depth here, but the depth is only indicated by overlapping planes. If we look to some of the earlier Chinese landscape paintings, we see a lot of similar approaches to form, to the overlapping, the kind of zigzag path through the composition that Seishu Toyo is using in his landscape as well. All right, when we come back, we are going to move to the Western Hemisphere and we are going to look at the interconnectedness of nature and art in the ancient Americas.